Hello again, and once again you are looking at a very mighty dash on a very, very small runway. We are sitting here backed up onto the very last bit of pavement on runway 7 here at KAJO, which is Corona, just on the edge of Riverside in Southern California. And the reason why we are here is to do something hard. Not only hard, but in this airplane to do something inadvisable. What we're going to do is we are going to fly for practice Pilotedge's I-11 exam. Now the I-11 is, as you might imagine, the 11th of a whole series of different tests of IFR flying. It being at the absolute pinnacle. It is the absolute hardest thing they've got in the arsenal. On the other hand, it is not impossible because many people do it, and it's going to be significantly easier for us because we are not on Pilotedge at the moment, which means that we will not be talking to simulated ATC. And it is very good ATC, and it is very stringent ATC. This is not gamer ATC. This is used by real pilots and real training facilities to get real training done, so they do not screw around. And they're very, very good. And one day soon, I hope to do this for real. Now, the reason why I say it's hard is because it is hard. The I-11 calls for us to make a very short flight, but a very challenging one. And you can already see by the map display, and you can already see from our nav setup that we've got a lot of stuff to do. And briefly put, this is our first challenge. What the I-11 is, and let me just show you on the map, it is deceptively simple. It is to take off from Corona right here, and right here, I'm sorry, and fly to the Paradise VOR. Okay, that's easy enough. And the route then takes us to the Victor 442 airway, and that seems easy enough. And the specification is to fly it at an appropriate altitude, and you can see right here it is 9,000. So we'll fly at 9,000, and that's easy enough. And well, hey, there's just one waypoint. We go to Apples, to the Apple Valley VOR, and that's all cool. And then we fly and approach into Victorville, Victor Charlie Victor, which has a 15,000 foot runway in the desert. How hard could that be? Well, the answer is harder than it seems, and here is why. First of all, Corona is an untowered airport, so it has an instrument procedure, but it doesn't have a SID. It doesn't have a tower. Obviously, it doesn't have departure control as such. So instead, what it's got is what's called an ODP, or an obstacle departure procedure. And I don't know everything about these things, but what I do know is this. Take a look. This is a list of the obstacle departure procedures for all the nearby airports. And as you can see, that's a lot of fine print. So here's Corona. We're taking off from runway 7. Now, the reasoning behind an obstacle departure procedure is very, very simple. We've got terrain here, and we've got terrain over there behind those clouds, and we've got terrain over here, and we've got airspace. And what the procedure is designed to do is basically do the same thing a controller would do, only it's a canned set of instructions to use if you don't have a controller, which we don't. And you'll excuse me for 1 second because I just nicked my rudder pedals and I put my, and it's going to keep doing this. Hang on a second. This seems to be a glitch of the new plane, of the Pro version. It's like one of those old routines. I got it, I got it, I got it. I ain't got it. Okay, now we're going to just sit here for a minute and just make sure that we're going to look at that really... I hate that. Try it again. No, stop it. All right, what we're going to do is we're going to pause the sim. That will be much easier. And forgive me, we won't have any ambient sound, but I'll only be yammering for a minute. Anyway, obstacle departure procedures are there to avoid terrain, to avoid traffic, and all the rest of it. It's basically a recipe, and it's a recipe that you disregard at your own peril. So, challenge number one is we fly this convoluted thing, which basically tells us if we're taking off on runway 7, these are our minimums, and we're within our minimums, so that's fine. And then we make a climbing left turn. Okay, well that's fine too. And we go direct to Paradise Vortac, and that's okay. Now, it has a list of conditions. If you're departing onto this radial, or this radial, or this, or that, you just keep going. Everything else you go to Paradise Vortac, which is, Vortac just means VOR and TACAN. TACAN is a VOR-like radio navigation aid, only it's used by the military. And instead of frequencies, I believe they have channels, but I don't know enough about it because I don't fly military jets. The important thing is that TACAN also provides the DME information, so if it's a Vortac, it almost certainly provides distance. Anyway, it says hold northeast right turns 210 inbound. Now what that means in English is it means that the correct hold is to fly inbound on the 210 radial, which means this way. I'm sorry, inbound on the 030 radial, this way on a heading of 210, get to the station, hook a right, fly for another minute or minute and a half, depending on what your standard hold is, and make another right and keep going. And they're basically putting you there, and let me just show it to you on the map. They are making you spin around this particular Vortac so that you can gain altitude here without running into any terrain, is usually why they do it. You've got a limited amount of space and you still have to gain altitude, and you've got terrain here or an airspace here, or you've got a traffic flow here, and what they want to do is they want to keep you pinned into a certain spot and climbing there. So this is the 030 radial, and what that hold would mean is that we would fly inbound here. As soon as we hit this, as soon as our needle flips, we'll turn 180 degrees, come out again, do that for a minute or a minute and a half, flip another 180 degrees, track back to the station, and so on and so on. The problem is we are not coming from the northeast. We are coming from the southwest. And so the procedure calls for us to fly out on runway heading, which is the way we're going, and then we make a slight left turn here, at which point we fly backwards on this radial, and we make a left turn. This is called a parallel hold entry, and we spin around and we reacquire the beacon here, and then we proceed with our hold as usual. Now that's challenge number one, and we do that until we get clear to our cruising altitude, which we're requesting at 9,000. Now we can only go up to 5,000 here unless cleared otherwise, so okay. Challenge number one is to do that. Challenge number two then happens when we get here to Apples, to Apple Valley, because here is our approach to Victorville. It's not a GPS, it's not an RNAV, it's not RNP, it's not ILS, it is the VOR DME runway 17 approach. Now, a VOR DME approach is what's called a non-precision approach, so you can't use it down to the barest of minimums, but you can go down to 400 feet above ground radar altitude, which would be 3225, so 3200, give or take. And what you do is you essentially fly this VOR radial in, because you see the airport and the VOR coincide, but it's not like a localizer. It's not quite enough to give you precision guidance. So you fly this little honey at 170 degrees inbound, and then you need some vertical guidance, but you don't have vertical guidance. All you've got is a recipe. Again, you got to be at a certain altitude at a certain distance, and a certain altitude and a certain distance. So 5200 when we cross Wened here, which is our intermediate fix. And then when we get to Uncal, 4300. And then when we get to Voinu, that's our missed approach point, okay? And what you have to do is you have to set yourself into about a 3-degree glide slope yourself, and you have to just, observe the distances and stay above the minima. That's challenge number 2, the fact that it's not a standard precision approach. Challenge number 3 is, how do we get to that approach? And we get to that approach not by a normal series of vectors and things. We get there by flying an arc. And this is an arc you can draw using GPS, using your FMS or FMC, and it can put an overlay over it. But we're going to fly this arc the way it was designed, which is an arc, a distance arc, using the DME from this very same station of 12.2 miles. And the reason why is pretty simple. There's mountains here. There's terrain at 4,896 feet here, 5,273 here. If you look at the sector we're going to be coming in on, it's 10,000 feet, or 7,600 feet, depending where on this radial we are. So that explains why there's an altitude here. 6,600 is the lowest you can go here. 5,200 is the lowest you can go here. At Wened, it's still 5,200, and then once you get coming down this slot, you can get down to 4,300 and so forth. Now, how do you know where Byth is? How do you know where this is? Well, you know by looking at which radial you happen to be on. So that's challenge number 4. We're going to get our way around this arc by using DME and by using our VOR receiver, so we can say, okay, we just hit 089 or 269, and so we're on it. Okay, we just hit 011 or 191. Okay, we just hit 360 or 180. Okay, we hit 350 or 170. There we are. So we're going to be doing that. And that is challenge number 4. Challenge number 5 is, it's not enough just to fly this approach. They want us to fly this approach down to minimums and then follow the missed approach procedure. And the missed approach procedure, luckily, doesn't involve changing any frequency, same VOR, but it involves us making a right turn to a heading of 300 degrees, which will intercept us onto this, joining this radial, and flying outbound until we get outside of the airspace for the airport, which is about 4 miles out, which is outside the class Delta. Once we do, then we turn around and we fly a visual approach to this same runway. So that, in a nutshell, is the I-11. Now, the reason why I said at the very beginning that this is inadvisable is simple. Well, first of all, let me tackle why it's difficult but not impossible. It is difficult because it's an involved procedure. that deals with modes of navigation that you don't ordinarily use. You don't see at a lot of airports. It is not impossible because the FAA doesn't want pilots all over the country killing themselves. So they've not designed this approach so you can fail at it. They've designed it so that if you observe reasonable procedures, you can succeed at it. And I mention it, I use this to illustrate it. Our hold here is, it's a little bit difficult in that it comes right after the airport, but it basically involves making, a 30-degree turn to the left. Well, we're coming from 070. It's a 40-degree turn to the left, and then a fairly standard hold entry. The VOR DME, it's a little bit involved, but as you'll see in a minute, there are actually several ways we can fly it, and we're going to actually set ourselves up to do it in a way that isn't exactly a cheat, but it's a nice way to back yourself up, I suppose. And I'll explain that in a minute. Now, as to why it is inadvisable, and let me see if my parking brake is on. No, of course not. As to why it's inadvisable, that's why. And this is why. This is a 3,000-foot strip. This is an airport that's not meant for this airplane, and this is a procedure, really, that isn't meant for planes that move this fast, that have this much power, that climb this quickly, and so on. As for the approach, well, there are DME arc approaches in use in this country and around the world. However, again, getting back to the inadvisability, most major airlines, and I'm saying this out of semi-knowledge and semi-ignorance, so somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but most major airlines, especially on their jet routes, will simply not fly into locations where the regular approach is something like this. And that's because even though this approach is by no means impossible, it's challenging. And if you're in a busy airspace and you're dealing with air traffic control and you're going through turbulence and you've got terrain and you've got a not entirely perfect flight crew that day, then you can have problems. That is generally why airlines with jets frown on approaches like this, generally fly into places that have working ILSs or working GPS or RNP approaches, and generally don't do circling approaches, period. Now, this isn't exactly a circling approach, but it's a kind of kissing cousin to it. But they generally do not want to do fancy dancing and complicated knob twiddling in big, fast-moving planes surrounded by terrain with passengers in the back. They just don't do it. So chances are you will not see this flown from this airport, at least, in anything other than a small plane. And the best way to do it right, in my estimation, is to find the plane with the best instrumentation and the most convenient instrumentation you can find that also happens to be capable of going so slowly that you can correct anything and that mistakes don't happen very quickly. But in this case, we haven't. So, again, apologies for the lack of the sound, but if I unpause the simulator, this brake is going to stay off, and then we're going to be just driving ourselves crazy. But here's what I did. Firstly, I did program in the route as into the FMS. You can see Corona to Paradise to the hold to Apples. We'll just take away, there's no link here, to the arc. And let me see, it has all those nice constraints built into the arc. We are not going to do that. We're just going to have that up there for guidance. The other thing I've done is I've tuned in to my VOR 1 and 2, my nav 1 and 2, the VOR for Paradise, and I've got it displayed two ways. I've got it set up as a, matter of fact, let me just quickly turn off the display for nav1 because we don't really need two sets of needles pointing at the same thing. I'll explain in a minute. I've got our standard HSI set up for the 210 into Paradise, and you can see we're pointing away from it. And you can also see that we're pointing across it. So, and you can also see that the station itself is at about 060 bearing from us right now, and we're pointing at 070. So what we are going to do, that's set up in the HSI. It is also set up in this needle, which is simulating a device called an RMI, which is a radiomagnetic indicator, which is basically just a needle that points at the either NDB or in this case the VOR and points towards it, and thereby displaying the instantaneous radial that you're on. So right now, if we turn immediately to 060, we'll go straight to that station. And in essence, we are sitting on the 06 radial shooting out of there. This is going to come in handy when we fly our arc, and let me show you why. If you imagine that an RMI is always pointing at the station, and you imagine that a radius is something wherein your airplane is always going to be perpendicular to the station, then the simplest thing in the world to do to stay on this arc is to fly at a fixed distance while this little needle is always, if you're flying to the left, counterclockwise, that this needle is always right there. And if you keep that needle right there and you keep this DME at 12.2, you're on it. And if you keep note of where this is pointing, you'll see that when it is pointing at 269, we're on the 089 radial. And when it is showing 191, then we're on the 011 radial. And when it says 180, we're on the 360 radial. And when it points to 017, then we are on we're on the 350 radial, and we're on our inbound course. So this is going to help us a lot, because the only other way to fly a DME arc, and we'll practice doing it, is to twist this as we're twisting the heading knob. So, all right. So to recap, what's going to happen is we are going to climb to 5,000. The other part of the obstacle procedure is we have to stay on the wash on a sort of riverbed coming out of there, which sort of heads this way, and that's going to put us right off to the right of the station right here. So let's review. I'm sorry, I got dyslexic. Climbing left turn. So we will climb left to eventually join the 030 going out, or the 210 going outbound, and then we will turn a left, and then we'll enter our hold. Now what you'll see is this will sequence it, but we are not going to be using it because, as you can see, we're going off of nav1 for guidance. So I'm looking for inspiration in all this, by the way, to a childhood memory. When I was a kid, I used to watch The French Chef, because part of the time I grew up, I was growing up outside Boston, and she was on WGBH. That's where she started. And Julia Child, the French chef, was famous for screwing things up and then fixing them. And the one thing that she always taught in her cooking students and in her viewers was, don't be scared to try it. I'll show you how to fix it. It might not be perfect, but it'll still be good. And since we're in a sim, we're not going to kill anybody. So we might as well give it a shot, right? So here we are. Let me just quickly check everything, check my trims and my flaps. I'm going to accelerate as much as I can to take off quickly from this short strip, but then I'm going to reduce my power considerably because I don't want to be going too damn fast. So this is not going to look like a standard departure, as it were. This is going to look a little bit funny. So let's set our initial heading, which is going to be a slight left turn. We'll set it for 030. We're actually a little bit less. I'm in heading select mode right now, but I'm not on autopilot. And in a second I'll set IAS mode, and I'll set it to a fairly slow speed, somewhere around 165, 170, because I don't really want to rush through this. As you can see, we're going to be flying out to here, going 030, turning 180 degrees to the left, and then coming in on this hold for right turns. So don't let me forget that. We're making a left turn, not a right, for the parallel entry, I think. Let me double check our hold. Yes, right turns, so in order to enter it, we're going to be turning to the left. The reason for that is to keep us within the protected area, or the holding area of the hold. I always get protected and holding. Whatever the good not hitting shit side is, that's the side we're going to be on. So with that, cross your fingers, everyone, because here we go. I-11 practice. Now again, I'm going to come up off the ground pretty hot and heavy here, and then we're going to start a left turn, a climbing left turn. And up we go. Gear up. I'm going to pull the props back almost immediately. Bring up our first notch of flaps. Go a little to the left, and I believe by the wash they mean this sort of valley over here. I don't really see a wash, but we're going to head direct paradise. And already a little bit fast, believe it or not. I know it doesn't seem like that. Put us in IAS mode. Put us in heading select. And now we're going to wait till we get to DME 0, and we're going to start our clock. And we're going to go for a minute outbound. Okay, we start our clock, and we're going to turn to 030. I'm going to look for a minute, and we are already there. So we're going to assume that we've been cleared to 9,000. So let's go up to 9. And outsell. And we flip, which means we're past the beacon, and we are coming up on a minute. Still looking for a minute. Alright. The clock did not start, so I'm just going to cheat with the DME. We'll do a 5-mile hold, and we will climb up to 9,000. Probably take one spin around this hold here, not even that, and then we will head outbound onto the V32, and we'll flip over our, see, notice how we're flying parallel to the station, and we're very close to it. We intercepted that really very nicely. When we come back in on it, we will not intercept it so nicely. We will spin it around to 210 minus 30 to intercept it. And already, you see that? We're already coming up on 9. Now I'm going to take one spin around this hole just to show you how it's done. Alright, there's our 5 miles. We'll spin our heading bug around to 180. and we're going to re-intercept. And our speed is coming up, so I'm going to haul right off there. I'm going to try to stay around 200, both because it's the appropriate holding speed, but also because I do not want anything to happen too quickly here. We're going to pretend like we're a bug smasher. Now you see we're going to come inside this hold and come back this way. And what I'll do is, almost immediately after we make our next turn, I'll head us back. That's the airport in Ontario there. Now, what makes this harder on Pilotedge is that you're talking to an air traffic controller. You have to call CTAF and say you're taking off. Before that, you have to call clearance. As soon as you pop up in the air, you have to call SoCal approach. And then after that, you get handed off to somebody else, and then you get handed off to the tower for Victorville, and then you get handed off again when you do your mist sometimes. So we're going to fly back towards the beacon, and again, this is the RMI pointing at it, and at the rate at which the Mighty Dash turns at this speed, we're not really going to spend a lot of time on the inbound, so almost as soon as we acquire it, we're going to loop back around. See, we're 5 miles away, but that is slant range. So let's just re-intercept it here. Taking care not to get on this side of the hold, and this is why the hold is there. It's because of this crap. Admittedly more important when you're below 5,000 than when you're at 9. I believe these are around 10, 11,000 foot hills. Hills mean different things out west than they do here in New York. Here, hills means Short Hills, New Jersey, and Short Hills are Short Hills. Alright, so you see we're intercepting the station, and we're practically going to get right to the station. So as soon as we do get to the station, we are going to hook a 180, and then we'll join the Victor 442. So here we come. We're in the zone of maximum confusion. We're literally right over the beacon practically. And I keep calling it a beacon, but it is actually a station. Okay, we're going to come back to 030. And then we're going to get out of Dodge. Now, just so my FMS doesn't bark at me, I'm going to discontinue this hold here in a second as soon as we turn around, and I'm going to go direct Apples, but I'm going to... Okay, there we go. Again, we're keeping right around 200 knots. Let me just keep that speed from creeping down too much. Turn off our auto feather. And I don't want to do a direct to too prematurely, because we will jerk around in the sky. So I'll do it now. Direct to Apples, and it's automatically going to make a right turn. And that will put us on our radial. Double checking here. I wish I could zoom this in more. Nope, can't do that. All right. So we will join the airway. there we go with that. Now at the moment I'm using FMS guidance, and that's basically to use all the tools in our tool shed, because I'm going to be abandoning the Paradise VOR, and instead we're going to be tuning in Victorville. And it's pointing right at the station right there. Now this is going to grow more acute as we get closer to Victorville, because the airport will slide off to our left hand side, and this will keep pointing at it, so it'll move like this and like this and like this and like this as we go past it. Now what we are looking for is we are looking for that needle to point right here at 269, and that will mark the beginning of our approach. The way I'm also going to demarcate that is we will put us back into heading select mode here, and we will switch our nav. Hang on, let's not do that yet. Let's square up our heading bug first. Lesson to you kiddies out there, always square up your heading bug. That's exactly why. Let's get us back on the airway. Now we can set up our heading bug, and it is set. Let's creep down again to about 200 knots, and you see how the angle is getting steeper? So what we're going to do is, in heading select mode, we're going to switch over our nav source, and we're going to spin our course to 269, and as soon as we get closer, this is going to be almost parallel to where we are, and when it is, this needle's going to come in, and when it comes in, it means we're moving across the radial and hitting it, and then we will turn it down to 191. Actually, we'll turn it to 259 and 249, etc., 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 as we go, as we twiddle this and the heading bug. But if all else fails, what we can do is we can use this. As long as we keep this pointed at whichever radial we want, we can do it that way too. I'm not sure how I want to do it. Anyway, let's keep our altitudes in mind. Our first restriction, actually we can get it right on the flight plan, which is very nice. If you look at the flight plan, it's got our restrictions. So we can come down to 6600, or start to, by Apples, which is at 269, and then we can be at 5200 by Byth. So let us do this. First, let's see how far away we are. Okay, we're 23 from Apples, and we're, there we go, about also 23 from the airport, just in a different direction. The airport's that way. So what we can do to get ready is we can get our altitude set at 6600. Now I could do a fancy VNAV thing here too, but let's just do it the old-fashioned way. Alt cell to keep us from going below that. Our V-speed, our vertical speed is 0 at the moment. Let me just get our V-speed set. They are. And you see how this needle is creeping around here? The closer we get going this way, the more off to our left the airport's going to be until it's behind us. And this is going to move, because this is pointing at the airport at the moment, so the airport is right there. I'm just looking at our power, finding out what's going to give us about 200 knots. And you'll see as we get into this, the reason why VOR or why DME arcs aren't done a whole hell of a lot, especially not in big planes. Now let's keep in the back of our head our missed approach procedure, which is to climbing right turn to 300 degrees and 6,000 feet. So we'll keep that in the back of our head. The other thing we'll do is we will set ourselves up for a reduced noise profile arrival, and that is done. And you see, here we come. Again, we're looking for 269, I do believe, and let me double check with the chart. Yes, 269 for the first one, and then 191 for the second one, and 360 we should start our turn onto the radio. So this is the only time we have to sit and think, and we don't have much of that. There's the arc, and there's the runway, and there's the mist. Again, at the moment we are in heading select, and we're going to stay in heading select. The reason why we are, no, I see why that's, the reason why we are is because there's not much of a wind. There's a very slight wind, and we'll probably deviate just a little bit to the outside, so I'm just going to set a heading one more degree, set up a little bit of a crab so we stay zero deviated here. It's basically what I'm doing. I'm flying in heading select, but I'm looking at this which designates our airway, and I am setting it that way. So Byth, we can come down to 6,600, and here comes our radio. Now we're 12.9, 12.8. When we hit 12.2, we will be right about where we need to be, which is right there, and that's when we will start our arc, and we'll also start our descent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just pull off even a little bit more power here. I'm just going to get us right at our minimum clean speed, or close to it, because as soon as I start our descent, of course, we're going to speed up, and I don't want to be managing speed at the same time I'm managing lateral position. So that's about right. The Mighty Dash has power to spare. Okay, so there's 300. Now we're less than 12.2 miles, but we will get greater than 12.2 miles as we cut across the tangent of that arc. So here we come. And when this starts to move, it means we're going to be approaching that radial. And as soon as we come, I'm also going to start to descend us a little bit. So again, we're heading to 6,600 at Byth. Okay, there's 12.1. Almost there. Almost ready to start. See the green needle creeping up there towards 269? And in a minute you'll see the CDI, the blue needle, start. There it is, starting to come in. Okay, so we're going to start. Go 10 degrees here. and 10 degrees here. A little bit wide, so we'll just keep that turn coming. See, we're 12.4, so we want to tighten that turn a little bit, and we can start to go down. Let's keep our turn coming, and we can just rack our course over like that. Now the next thing we're looking for is 191, at which point we can be at 6,600. Okay, we're at 12.3 miles on the DME. .2, just about perfect. The station is just a little bit out ahead of us, so we can loosen that turn a little bit. Okay, there's 12.1, so let's fly outbound just a little bit more. We are coming down nicely. That's 12.0, so let me just widen it. I believe the limit is 1 mile in either direction, or maybe a half mile in each direction, but we're going to be more precise than that. Okay, so we're just going to flatten this out, spin our course around, 1,000 away. Okay, there's 12.1, so let's start the turn again. Again, we're looking for 191, at which point we can come down to 5,200. Okay, there's 12.2. There we go. Looking good. Coming up on 230. 12.3. Let's maintain the turn a little bit. Okay, there's 12.2. And let's fly that outbound just a little bit more. Come off the power a little bit. Okay. Spin our course again. And now I'm going to set our final course for 170, which is going to be our final. Okay, we're going to fly us outbound a little bit more. We just got a little bit too tight. Coming up on 210. And now I'm just using the RMI. Okay, now we can come down to 5,200. I'll sell, and down we go. Slow down a bit more. Okay, there's 12.1. We are looking good. Let's come off the power a bit and we'll come down a bit faster. Okay, 12.1. Again, we're looking for 180 when we'll make our turn. Out a notch of flaps, drop our gear. We're at 12.2, still looking good. And then we're going to turn and intercept this when we get to 180, which we will momentarily. Coming up on 5200. And we are just about at 180. So let's make our turn to 170. Actually slightly less than that because we want to intercept it. And then we can start down to 4300. Okay, there we go. Down we go. And now I'm going to
2500.
That's 2500 above ground. I'm now going to put us in nav mode, and it is going to intercept. And I'm going to spin us down to 2885. Spin our heading around to 170. Now remember, our mist is climbed to 6,000. And there's 4,300. I'm just going to level us off for 1 second so we don't bust that altitude. I'm going to put in our next 2 notch of flaps. Set our decision height to 400. All right. Set this for 3,300, alt cell, vertical speed, and start bringing us down on the approach. We're 6 miles away, and we are 1,500 feet above the runway. So we can make it a nice shallow approach, and there's the runway. Now, on departure, we're going to fly a heading of 300. Get that set up. Let's pretend we're landing, so get fully configured for landing. We'll set our missed approach heading for 300, and that's to join the 269 radial. Okay, we're 1,000 above the field. I'm going to fly the plane for the moment.
1,000.
And we're a little high. And we're going to go missed. So,
Too low.
gear up, toga.
Too low. Gear.
Throttles to max.
100.
Props to climb. Turn to 300.
1,000.
got that procedure right. Climb right, turn to 6,000 via 300, so here we go. And I've got a caution somewhere, but I'm not going to do anything about it. That's my flaps. Okay. And we want to fly on the 269. A little bit out of trim. Alright, so let's fly right up there to 6,000 feet and join the radial. That was sloppy. So we're looking for the 269 outbound. I believe I've blown past it. No, I haven't. I haven't turned enough. Bring back our power. Didn't make that turn hard enough is what I didn't do. Just retrim here is the problem. Come down to 6,000, level us off, and we'll be in business. Okay, there's our 300 heading, more or less. Let's slow down, climb up to 6, get ourselves level, and get back in the ball game. All right, back into heading mode, turn our course to 269. Gonna blow across this in 1 second if I don't get it tuned in right. Nine, okay. We're on a nice intercept. We'll put ourselves in nav mode. We'll intercept that and we can enter the hold, but we're not going to fly the hold. Instead, we're going to get permission to come out of the hold and head back to the field visually. At this point, you're supposed to cancel your VFR clearance and then fly inbound visually. This is so hazy that we're going to pretend that instead we said unable to proceed VFR, request vectors back to the field, or request Victorville via the 269 and then take it from there. So here we go, coming into ether. We're outside of the airspace, and we are going to pretend, and the airport is showing back that way and also showing back that way on our RMI. We're going to pretend we got clearance back to the field. So in a second, I'm just going to flip us around and turn us back, and then we will come in and land visually. So we're off over here. So we want to turn, and I believe it is right traffic, so we want to turn ourselves out this way onto an extended 45 for a downwind and then come in. So let's do that. Let's remember there's a hold here, so well actually, you know, there's more terrain here than there. So let us do this. Spin our heading around. Get us back into heading select. Bring our props back to cruise. Get ourselves reconfigured and land. And what we'll do is we'll follow this radial right back to the field, or back to within seeing distance of the field, I suppose. And we'll probably end up deviating just a little bit to the left and get ourselves on a right downwind. Now remember, when you're on Pilotedge or in the real world, you're also communicating with ATC, so it can be interesting. Challenging, hard. Let's come down to what is going to be pattern altitude for us, which will be 2800, which will be 3300. I'm not going to start a descent yet because we have terrain. Although I think we're going to come in this little, come over this little bump, and then we'll be good to go. With the haze, it's hard to tell. Alright, so I'm setting us up basically. Well, let's do it by the book. Let's get right back on the radial until we get within contact of the airport. And we'll set this up on the 089 course. And you can see we're on intercept for it. We'll hit nav and we'll grab it. And that'll get us back. We're 11 miles away. If I want to be able to see the field within about 5, and I'll get us on a downwind leg to runway 17, and we'll do it all over again. Slow us down. Now I can start our descent. That should do us. Hit the magic alt cell. Roll off our power. Put us back into reduce noise profile landing mode. And start looking for the airport. Should be right about there. But we are in the hazies. Miles away, still no airport. Square up our heading bug so we don't make the same mistake we made earlier. There is the strip. All right. Make sure we are where we're supposed to be. Alright, so let's put ourselves on a 45 for the downwind. For this very long runway 17. And I'm going to have trouble seeing the field. This could be interesting. Okay, we're trying to come down to 3,300.
Caution, terrain. Caution, terrain.
I'm okay. Put in our first notch of flaps. Drop our gear. Keep contact, okay. We'll widen that out just a little bit, so we will come around to 350. Try not to get too far away in the haze here. Put in a reasonable piece of power. Get my pretty little feet on the rudder pedals. I'm looking at my DME here also to cheat. What I'm doing is I am waiting till we're about 7 miles away. I think a 7-mile final would be reasonable. I don't want to do too tight a pattern because I can't see anything. On the other hand, I don't want to go too far because I can't see anything. So we're flying on the downwind leg, so let's turn base. And that's going to be to 080, and we're fully configured for landing. Probably going to be just a little high. Is that the field right there? I believe it is. If not, I'm going to be very embarrassed. Well, we should be abeam the field right now. And yet, I can't see it.
1,000.
Let's make sure our speed is okay. Boy, desert sucks. There it is. Okay. A little bit low, but we'll make do. See, this was the risk. The risk was fly far enough away to have a comfortable pattern, fly too far away, and lose the field. There we are. All right. A little bit low, but there ain't nothing below us but sand. There's a very heavily displaced threshold. Slow down a bit. And bring the sucker home. Reacquire the pappies here.
Minimums. Minimums.
And we're landing this time. Look at that.
100.
And I'm going to screw up the landing here, I know it.
50, 40, 30, 20, 10.
All right, we'll take it. And we will exit at the Howard Johnson's here on the left. If you don't know what Howard Johnson's is, ask your great-grandpa. But Howard Johnson's were awesome. And welcome to Victorville, the final resting place for an awful lot of airplanes. This is a boneyard for airliners, but it is not a boneyard for the Mighty Dash. Anyway, I hope you got something out of this. I know I did. I know I'm going to have fun when I do this for real. And I also know that with any luck I will never ever do this in real life. Anyway, you know the drill. Let me know what you think. Like it if you liked it. Subscribe if you want to see more. And as always, thanks for watching. See you next time.